let me begin with my background so you know a little bit more of where I come from. 12 years ago, Governor Steve Merrill appointed me to the State Board of Education, so I had the opportunity to serve on the State Board for a number of years and had an opportunity, quite frankly, a decade ago to shape education policy. I was also in the midst of the Claremont lawsuit. Let me start with the last point you raised, and that is, what is it that we can do so that students at Plymouth State University majoring in education have the greatest opportunities, both for professional development, for job satisfaction, and so forth, going into a teaching career? And I believe that merit pay is one of the answers. Merit pay in the sense that young people like yourselves coming out of school, perhaps going on to graduate school, and then going into the teaching environment, and over 3 to 5 years just showing an extraordinary amount of energy. There needs to be something that rewards your extraordinary production in the form of a merit pay opportunity, as opposed to the kind of regulated step increases. However, what's the issue that interferes with that? It's the local unions. It's the bargaining that is negotiated, and there's pluses and minuses to both sides. But in terms of answering your question, what would I like to see? I'd like to see teachers have the opportunity to show through their demonstrated success that they can be rewarded financially, not unlike the private sector, folks, that you get to be CEO over a span of time because you've demonstrated a certain kind of an ability, leadership, decision-making, and performance. And all of that criteria should be used for our teachers as well. Now let me go back in terms of No Child Left Behind. And just in general, the whole funding of education. I'm in favor of continuing the No Child Left Behind program. What I'm not in favor of is unfunded mandates. And that is true outside the education arena, but it just seems to be an unfortunately popular issue within the education arena. And what I mean by that, of course, is that when Congress votes that here is what will be required in the special education field, for example, and then Congress doesn't bother to vote the funding to support it. So here in the school district in Plymouth, New Hampshire, the federal law says, and here's what the school district has to do, without the money funded by Congress to do it. Thank you. I would be completely against the whole notion of unfunded mandates, particularly in the education arena, but more broadly, I would never cast a vote for a law that would carry with it unfunded mandates. Thank you.
I think the education question is part of our economic challenge. And as I said, we're having a hard time retaining trained and working-age people in New Hampshire. I went to public school 12 years in the Hillsborough-Deering School District. It's announced over the weekend Hillsborough-Deering has the highest dropout rate in the state. So that was not a particularly proud day for me, having gone through that school system and getting a good education. No Child Left Behind. I think our schools are far too important to get the federal government that involved. And I think No Child Left Behind is what happens when you lock Ted Kennedy in a room and ask him to write an education bill. It's not that it came with strings, it's that it is strings. It's nothing but strings. And we had a precursor to No Child Left Behind here in New Hampshire. The Clinton administration had a plan called Goals 2000 back in the 90s. I know Jim worked on that when he was on the school board. I hope he'll maybe use his rebuttal time to talk about why he supported it. I opposed it. I think No Child Left Behind was the wrong way to go. We've seen it with special education funding under IDEA, where years ago, back in the 70s, Congress promised to fund up to 40%. Well, they haven't gotten close to 40%. Republican Congress actually increased that significantly, but still not to 40%. So even if they follow through on their promise, that's only a 60% unfunded mandate. Thank you, Congress. I think our local school districts need more flexibility in meeting our special education needs, because particularly in small towns, 2 or 3 students can just cripple a school budget. And again, that's a federal mandate that we, even under the best case scenario, say is going to be 60% unfunded. Your second question was a retirement bubble with teachers and a teacher shortage. I think we need to free up the classroom, give good teachers the freedom to teach. You're never going to go into teaching for the money or the glory. You're going to go into it because you think you can make a difference, and I salute that. My grandmother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher. I had one day as a special ed teacher, as a substitute teacher at John Stark Regional High School, and that was one of the toughest days of work I ever had. We need to give teachers the freedom to teach, and that means giving them flexibility in the classroom. It means accountability and competition. It means an end to teacher tenure. I don't want the federal government setting those rules. I want local school districts setting those rules. I want parents making decisions for their local school districts.
I could have a rebuttal moment, because Grant is correct.
No, I guess not.
What's that?
No rebuttal.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I was told we'd have a second rebuttal.
No, I know our time is short, and that's quite fine.
Sorry, but if you'd like to.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
First, let me answer the question that you asked, which was about early on there about No Child Left Behind. Because whether it should be or shouldn't be, it is. And so we do have to deal with it. And there's no question that No Child Left Behind has offered a number of challenges to local school districts and to teachers in the classroom. It's been in place long enough now that it is time for us to go back and revisit. It's time for us to go back and look at and see what works and what doesn't work. I am a fan of setting standards, of setting goals and enforcing standards. I'm not a fan of saying that we're going to measure the success of any one school or any one school district by taking the most challenged students and the most gifted students and combining their scores and their successes and saying that's how we measure the school. I think we need to look at No Child Left Behind and understand that the state of New Hampshire has received an additional $60 million in education funds from the federal government since No Child Left Behind was implemented. If we aren't feeling the effects of that money, we have a right to know why. I'd like to know where that $60 million has been spent, how it's been spent. So I think that No Child Left Behind has had enough time to show us what it can do, and it's time now for us to stop and reevaluate and make an educated decision about whether or not it's a program that should stay in place, whether it's a program that should be altered in some way, or whether it's a program that should be eliminated completely. Short of that, or beyond that, I am not a big fan of the federal government being involved in education. I'm not a big fan of the federal government being any more involved than they are constitutionally directed to be in anything. And it is an economy issue. When you talk about how do we bring good teachers to the classroom, and how do we encourage good gifted people to become teachers. I am a fan of merit pay. I think that when you open the market and pay people what they are worth and give them the incentive to work toward something, then performance always improves. It always brings better people to the table. We have to look at why is it so expensive to do business, to run schools, to hire teachers, everything that we do. The cost of healthcare is out of control. You were talking about the National Teachers almost strike. Healthcare was at the heart of those contract negotiations. The cost of healthcare is out of control. That can be addressed. That is an area where we can have an impact. We need to, healthcare has got to be, we have got to address the cost of healthcare in a more of a free market manner, greater choices rather than fewer choices. But whether it's teachers or managers or farmers, any job out there, the reason these are economy issues is because all of the things that affect what you're concerned about with teachers affect every other industry as well. It is too expensive to do business in this country. It is too complicated. The government is too involved. So we have, it does come down to pulling the government out of involvement where they don't belong and doing what's necessary to maintain long-term economic stability.